He dropped his radio. He took off his belt. And then he ran straight into the forest and vanished. His name was Terrence Woods Jr., a 26-year-old film crew member on a remote Idaho set. Search teams spent days combing the area with dogs, ATVs, and heat detection helicopters. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no confirmed trace of any kind. But here's what makes even less sense. The night before, he called his father. Nothing unusual, no signs of distress. The next morning, he told his employer he needed to leave early. Said his mother was having surgery. That wasn't true. And by the end of that day, he was gone. 7 years later, the case is still open. To understand why this case is so difficult to explain, you have to start with the environment, because in this case, the environment is evidence. Oro Grande isn't really a town anymore. It's a ghost town deep inside the Nez Perce National Forest. Idaho County itself spans roughly 8,500 square miles, larger than some U.S. states, with a population of only around 16,000 people. The forest covers nearly 4 million acres. The terrain near Penman Mine, where Terrence was last seen, is steep, heavily wooded, and extremely isolated. There's no cell service, visibility is limited, movement is slow. Investigators pointed to this environment early on as the most likely explanation. But it's also the explanation that leaves the biggest gaps. Terrence Woods Jr. wasn't inexperienced. He was a broadcast journalist and documentary production professional who had built much of his career in the United Kingdom. He worked on major productions, including The Voice UK, and contributed to a BBC wildlife documentary. He had traveled internationally, including work in Morocco. By all accounts, he was methodical, professional, reliable, someone used to high-pressure environments, which makes what happened next harder to explain. He had been hired by Raw TV, a London-based production company, to work on the first season of Gold Rush, Dave Turin's Lost Mine. On September 30th, 2018, his father dropped him off at the airport in Washington, D.C. From there, he traveled to Missoula, Montana, where the crew assembled before heading to Idaho. On the night of October 4th, just before midnight, he called his father. That would be their last conversation. At that point, he had been on the job for 5 days. Nothing seemed wrong. But approximately 6 hours later, something changed. In the early morning of October 5th, Terrence's father received a message. His son said he would be coming home early, on October 10th, nearly 5 weeks ahead of schedule. The reason he gave, his mother was having surgery. That wasn't true. There was no surgery scheduled. That false explanation is one of the most important details in the entire case, because it raises a question investigators still can't answer. Why did he need to leave? Later that morning, the crew was filming at Penman Mine. According to accounts from crew members, Terrence began acting strangely. At one point, he reportedly tried to grab a drone out of the air with his bare hands. These accounts were never independently verified, but they established something critical. Something was wrong hours before he disappeared. And despite that, no medical help was called. That decision has been heavily questioned, especially by his father. If Terrence was in distress severe enough to disrupt filming, why was no one brought in to evaluate him? Raw TV later released a brief public statement, saying the shoot had been running normally and that Terrence had appeared in good spirits. They denied any wrongdoing, and according to Terrence's father, the company declined to provide the names of the crew members present that day. By late afternoon, the crew was wrapping up. Sometime between 5 and 5:30 p.m., Terrence told someone he needed to use the bathroom. Moments later, he ran. He ran down a steep slope, described by witnesses as almost a cliff, and straight into the forest. Before he did, he dropped his radio and removed his belt. An associate producer later told his father that Terrence was running faster than he had ever seen anyone run. Crew members tried to follow. They couldn't keep up. At 6:41 p.m., the Idaho County Sheriff's Office received the call reporting him missing. The caller was not publicly identified, but the description they gave would shape the entire case. They said Terrence had been struggling emotionally, that he had experienced some kind of breakdown earlier that day. That became the first official explanation. The search didn't begin until the following morning. Multiple agencies responded. Dog teams tracked a scent trail believed to be his. It led through the forest and eventually to a road. And then it stopped. Completely. Investigators couldn't determine which direction he went. They couldn't confirm whether he had continued on foot, or whether he entered a vehicle. They couldn't even say with certainty that the tracks were his. Aerial searches found no heat signature. Ground teams found no clothing. No personal items beyond what he dropped. No signs of injury. No signs of struggle. Then the weather changed. Rain moved in. Snow followed. After 7 days, the active search was suspended. What the search didn't find is just as important as what it did. Because if Terrence had remained in that environment, there should have been something. Years later, the sheriff who led the response gave his assessment. He believes Terrence is still on that mountain, that the search missed him. At the same time, he described the case as a possible voluntary disappearance, a runaway scenario. Those two conclusions don't easily fit together. Because if Terrence left the mountain alive, there should be a trace. Financial activity, digital presence, a sighting. There is none. Two details from that day make the case even more difficult to explain. The first is his suitcase. When investigators examined his belongings, it was neatly packed. That's not consistent with someone planning to disappear permanently. It's consistent with someone expecting to travel. The second is his final known post. Just hours before he vanished, Terrence uploaded a photo to his private Instagram account. It showed a dense forest and a river. The caption was a single word: Idaho. No context, no explanation. It's the last confirmed action he took. One of the biggest unanswered questions in this case involves something investigators never publicly addressed. His laptop and his camera. Tools he used professionally. Devices that may contain messages, files, or recordings from the days leading up to October 5th. As far as the public record shows, they were never forensically analyzed. And after that road, there's nothing. No confirmed sightings, no activity, no trace of any kind. 7 years later, it's as if Terrence Woods Jr. disappeared twice. Once into the forest, and once from the world entirely.